cosmic dance, captured in stunning colors. NASA's new $10 billion James Webb Space Telescope produces the deepest and sharpest infrared image of the distant Carina Nebula to date. Will it take a big step? South Korea's central bank looks set to raise its key interest rate for an unprecedented third time in a row on Wednesday to curb inflation and prevent an exodus of capital. South Korean drama Squid Game continues to make history, landing an Emmy nomination for Outstanding Drama, meaning it's the first ever non-English language series to be up for the title. The Netflix drama has 14 Emmy nominations, including Lee Jung-jae for lead actor, Jung Ho-yeon for supporting actress, along with other key cast members.
Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. A new era of astronomy has begun with NASA revealing images from the James Webb Space Telescope, which was launched 6 months ago.
The world's largest and most powerful telescope has shown some colourful high-resolution pictures of space that humans have never seen before. These include the presence of water vapour in another planet's atmosphere. Kim Yo-sun starts us off this morning.
NASA has unveiled images from the James Webb Space Telescope showing the deepest view of the universe that has ever been captured. Among the first batch of full-color high-resolution pictures taken by the world's largest and most powerful orbital observatory ever launched are breathtaking views of a distant galaxy group as well as a huge gas cloud surrounding a dying star. Perhaps the most lauded image was a so-called deep field image of a distant galaxy cluster whose combined mass acts as a magnifying glass for the objects behind them. The new release also includes the telescope's first light spectrum of an exoplanet, showing light emitted at different wavelengths from WASP 96b, which is a planet outside our solar system that was first discovered in 2014. The spectrum from Webb also revealed the presence of water vapor in the planet's atmosphere. The space agency says they have now ushered in the dawn of a new era in astronomy. It emphasized that the Webb telescope will help humanity uncover answers to questions we don't even yet know to ask. The Webb telescope, a collaboration between NASA, the European Space Agency, and the Canadian Space Agency, was launched into space on December 25, 2021, and is seen as a successor to the Hubble Space Telescope, which was launched in 1990. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
The Bank of Korea Wednesday looks set to raise its key rate to curb inflation and prevent an exodus of capital. This comes as the US Federal Reserve appears highly likely to take similar action again. Our Kim Ji-yeon provides a glimpse of what to expect.
South Korea's consumer prices in June rose to their highest level in nearly 24 years. Earlier this month, Statistics Korea said the consumer price index had risen by 6% compared to the same period last June. It attributed the increase to price hikes of intermediate goods and grain. The situation is driving up the cost of living for many as wage increases remain stagnant. To curb inflation, it's widely expected the Bank of Korea will take the big step for the first time in history, raising the country's key interest rate by 0.5%, rather than the traditional 0.25% from its current 1.75%. The move will make it more expensive for people to borrow money, thus curbing demand and in turn ease inflation pressures. It's also seen as a move to try to lessen the gap between key interest rates with the U.S. It is feared that a higher U.S. rate compared to Korea will spark an exodus of capital.
To counter inflation, the monetary tightening, key interest rate hikes certainly seem like the direction it's going in. There's also concerns of a reversal in interest rates.
The U.S. Federal Reserve had raised interest rates by 0.75 percentage points, often referred to as 75 basis points at its June meeting, the largest single move since 1994. Central bankers have typically raised interest rates by quarter-point increments in recent decades, and the acceleration came as the Fed doubled down on its fight against rapid inflation. Now, multiple media outlets in the U.S. have reported that at least 2 Fed officials have spoken in favor of a 0.75 percentage point rate increase this month, even with recession worries abound. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Government ministries are making their maiden progress reports to the President, and the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy presented its plans for nuclear power on Tuesday, investing in future industries and strategies for trade. The Ministry of SMEs and Startups, on the other hand, shared its plans to support startups in high-tech industries and to provide relief to small businesses. Jeong has the details.
With the Yoon administration's private-led growth policy, South Korea's trade and business ministries have a lot on their shoulders. Government ministries this week began reporting their recent progress to the president for the first time since he took office, and on Tuesday it was the turn of the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy. Amid soaring global energy prices, the ministry will focus on energy security. It'll restructure the country's energy sources so that at least 30% comes from nuclear power. Also, it'll work to stabilize electricity in summer and create $380 billion in funds to nurture the hydrogen industry. Regarding energy, President Yoon told the Minister of Trade, Industry and Energy that the ministry should lead the deals to export nuclear power plants to European nations, as discussed during the NATO summit in Madrid last month. Another big pillar covers developing major industries, including that of semiconductors. There will be regulatory reforms to the key industries as well as the training of 140,000 professionals. The ministry will push to designate national strategic technologies in the fields of semiconductors, batteries, display, AI, and robots. The ministry will also focus on strengthening supply chains through customized cooperation and by diversifying imports. It also plans to lead international trade by utilizing existing partnerships, including the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. A set of standards will also be devised to help domestic firms. President Yoon told the Trade Ministry to actively support the semiconductor industry and abolish unnecessary regulations. He also said that training professionals will lead to growth in key industries. The Ministry of SMEs and Startups also reported their work to the president on Tuesday, also focusing on high-tech industries. It'll create 1,000 projects to support startups in future industries, including semiconductors and AI. Also, for small businesses, it'll further provide financial relief. The SMEs ministry also plans to standardize the unit price so that they don't get ripped off when selling their products to conglomerates. Also, it'll support firms by expanding the number of smart factories and regulation-free zones. President Yoon called on the Ministry of SMEs and Startups to monitor any unfair contracts between conglomerates and small and medium-sized firms. Also, he told the ministry to support small and medium-sized companies both financially and through R&D so that they can grow into global firms. He also urged the ministry to go all out to ease the burden on them. Jeong, Arirang News.
The war in Ukraine is making fertilizer more expensive, which affects crops of all kinds. Now, rice production could come under threat, which would have further ripple effects. Yoon provides a closer look.
After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the global food supply has been hit with a surge in prices for wheat and corn. The prices of rice has managed to hold out against the instability so far, but that may not last much longer as fertilizer prices continue to hit record highs. Experts cite panic over supplies in 2008 when rice soared above $1,000 a ton, which is more than double the current level. Most of the world's rice is grown and eaten in Asia. Thailand is the world's second largest rice exporter. Farmers not only have to cope with erratic weather due to climate change, but have now reached a critical point as higher fertilizer prices have led to decreased nutrients for crops, which in turn have cut yields, resulting in a failure to meet global demand.
The major problem of the war of Ukraine for us is the relationship between energy prices and fertilizer prices. So what we are observing is that the prices of gas has gone up. That has increased the cost of producing fertilizers, specifically nitrogen, which Russia Federation is the first exporter of nitrogen in the world, the second of potassium, and the third of phosphorus.
While India is expected to play a role in helping to ease tightened rice supply in Asia for the time being, there's further concern that the Ukraine war may jeopardize food security in Africa. Even prior to the invasion, Africa had a high reliance on international food markets for their food supply, with a fifth of its population already suffering from hunger. But as more countries are impacted by food price inflation, the global ripple effect could ultimately lead to the destabilization of African governments. Yoon, Arirang News.
The new U.S. ambassador to South Korea met with the nation's top diplomat. During their first meeting since taking the post, Philip Goldberg thanked Park Jin for his warm welcome and said he looks forward to furthering their great alliance. The official vowed to work with the South Korean government to strengthen their global strategic partnership, an upgrade to the alliance. Seoul's foreign minister said he was glad to have Goldberg as the new ambassador and expressed hopes the official works to further strengthen bilateral ties. Earlier in the day, Goldberg submitted his credentials to the foreign ministry, a formal process signaling the start of his new role. U.S. President Joe Biden has named 5 new federal judge nominees, which includes Korean-American Cindy Chung. If confirmed, Chung will become the first Korean-American to serve as a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. In a statement Tuesday, the White House said that Chung was nominated to become a new judge on the appellate court with jurisdiction over district courts in the states of Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, as well as the U.S. Virgin Islands. Various tech advancements help provide greater convenience, but that's not always the case for seniors and people with disabilities. To cater to their needs, Seoul City is providing easier kiosks and digital training sessions. Song Yoo-jin tells us more.
These days, you could easily buy food, drinks, and movie tickets without having to speak to another person. This is all thanks to unmanned kiosks. But for some groups, such as seniors and the disabled, these kiosks can be more of a burden. The small letters on the screen are hard to read, and a wrong touch could mean starting all over again. This can be stressful, especially if other people are waiting. And it can even make them feel more socially isolated.
It takes a lot of time for you to place an order if you're not used to using kiosks. This puts you in a tough spot, especially when there are people lined up behind you. Some people just give up in the end.
And to help these groups out, Seoul City is taking action. The city government, in cooperation with private companies and disability organizations, is developing a kiosk that's easy for seniors and the disabled to use. It'll be ready for use by the end of this year. The city has also appointed 100 digital guides who will show people how to use kiosks and smartphones. They will go into action from July 25th after 2 weeks of training. Seoul City is also going to run a campaign that encourages people to understand and wait for those who are unfamiliar with kiosks. And to help more citizens become better at using kiosks, a one-day training program where trainees learn the instructions and apply what they've learned will start from July. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
It's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. Tottenham Hotspur is currently in South Korea for their pre-season tour, and we've already witnessed a very warm welcome by fans of the team at Incheon International Airport, with South Korean players Son and Tottenham even showing up to surprise his teammates.
Well, fans will get a glimpse of the new team's new signings in action tonight as Spurs face a combined K-League selection this evening. How bright is the season looking for the North London side and South Korean ace Son Heung-min? For more, we have a sports journalist Yoo Ho with us today. Good morning.
Good morning.
First, let's compare Tottenham's new summer signings with transfers completed by other English Premier League sides. How do you rate Spurs' transfer business?
Well, the Spurs have been quite busy this summer. They've signed 5 players already, including Everton forward Richarlison, joining them on a 5-year contract. You know, he was actually just in Korea last month for a friendly for Brazil against South Korea, and Son Heung-min. Now he's teammates with Son Heung-min. French defender Clement Lenglet completing his loan from FC Barcelona to Tottenham. He's a left-footed center back. That's the position that Spurs have been targeting this summer, and they were able to address that early on. Mali International leaves Bissouma also leaving Brighton to sign with Tottenham. That's a 4-year deal. And they've also got goalkeeper Fraser Forster from Southampton and very versatile Ivan Perisic from Inter Milan. So these handful of players joining the team early in the preseason, and their manager, Antonio Conte, talked about how he liked the way the club moved so quickly to sign them early in the summer so that he can work them into the new system, rather than having them coming in that much closer to the start of the new season. So, they're going to have a pretty busy schedule next season. 4 competitions on the fixtures. You've got the Premier League, they've got the League Cup, FA Cup, and of course the UEFA Champions League. So that's a lot of football for any team, and you've got to have depth to survive those competitions.
Well, as you mentioned, some really big signings happening at the moment. Players perhaps drawn to the club by the prospect of playing Champions League football this season. And well, Spurs, though, they've missed out on the Champions League for a couple of seasons now. So how do you think they're going to fare?
They were the runner-ups back in 2019 to Liverpool, and I think that was the closest that Son and Tottenham ever really came to winning a major trophy in his European career. And he has said a lot of times that that's his ultimate goal, to win a trophy in Europe. And this is going to be Conte's first full season in charge of Tottenham, and I guess it really depends on the draws. The draw will be in August. They're going to be in the same pot as some of the giants like Liverpool, Chelsea, and Barcelona. So they're going to have a little bit of a luck, hopefully, in the draw. And but the way the team's set up right now, the way the squad is looking, I think anything short of obviously knockouts will be a major disappointment for Tottenham.
Right, now let's focus on, of course, our very own Son Heung-min. How do you see this upcoming season going for him after achieving so much in the last one?
Well, he does have a tough act to follow, doesn't he? Having won the Golden Boot, having scored 23 goals to become the first Asian to win that honor in the Premier League. And he just turned 30 years old. I think he's still in his athletic prime. And maybe winning the second straight Golden Boot might be a bit of a big ask, but he should, I think, still be among the top scorers in England. And if you recall, this past season, he did not have Harry Kane at full strength, or at least mentally, he didn't. I don't think he was there in the first couple of matches. So if the duo can get it going really from the start this season, I think we can see something special from those two duos.
And well, before we let you go, there are going to be fans around the world tuning in to catch Spurs against the K-League combined team tonight. I think our editor Steve is actually going to the game. And well, when it comes to South Korea's domestic league, are there any particular players that you're going to be watching out for?
I think one player that's worth I guess closer look in this particular setting would be Lee Seung-woo from Suwon FC. He's a former FC Barcelona youth player. He's one of the more exciting and one of the most popular players in the K-League. And he plays with a lot of flair. He's got a lot of skills. And this is just the kind of the player that you like to see in a setting like this. Sort of an exhibition match. And the results ultimately don't matter. So players can go out there, kind of unleash themselves a little bit and show off their skills. And Lee Seung-woo and Son Heung-min, they were teammates back in 2018 Asian Games when they won the gold medal. So they do have a bit of a personal history there as well. And the Team K-League head coach Kim Sang-sik joked about how he wanted Lee Seung-woo to score a lot of goals and sort of make an impression on Conte so that he could actually go back to Europe at some point in his career. So, that's, I think, one player that a lot of fans will be keeping a close eye on tonight.
Right, and they are definitely playing at one of South Korea's best stadiums for football at Seoul World Cup Stadium. Would you introduce that stadium to us, to the fans from global viewers who have no idea what that stadium stands for?
Well, I guess it's sort of a mecca of football in Korea, right? It was built for the World Cup back in 2002. One of the, I guess the most symbolic, not just in football, but all the sports facilities, one of the more symbolic facilities in this country. And it has hosted a lot of significant matches in the years past, and even this year, just this last month, hosting Brazil before sellout crowd in a friendly match. And tonight's match also a sellout. Fans will be watching Son Heung-min in his Tottenham kits on home soil for the first time. So that it means a lot for the player himself, and that means a lot for the fans as well.
Well, thank you. We look forward to speaking with you in the future, and have a good morning.
Okay, thanks for having me today.
And that wraps up the first half of New Day at Arirang, but stick around. Coming up in the second half,
we're going to cover the weeks-long tug-of-war at the National Assembly as major political party floor leaders try to come to an agreement for the leadership of major parliamentary committees. We're going to discuss what's on the agenda for the two largest parties of South Korea, as one holds the majority in the parliament while the other holds the executive branch. So join us for that in a moment for the second half of New Day at Arirang.
South Korea's experience in tackling COVID-19 and introduced a Korean New Day. A Korean survivor of Japan's wartime sex slavery met with
extraordinary climate crisis and pledged to work with the EU to tackle the challenge.
The objective of its North Korea policy is
protesters gathering across the country to peacefully demand an end to hate and violence.
Arirang, what matters?
넌 볼 수 없고 가질 수 없어 뚝뚝 눈물 쏟아내도 뜨거운 자태 한번 비추지 않고 내게만 가치란 그녀는 유명한 서울의 별다 어딨나 In your eyes 걔와 함께면 넌 디스토피아 내 발걸음 따라오면 유토피아 나의 나
I feel so good right now. Maybe I had a drink or two, but this somehow feels like it's forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Maybe this is forever. All my friends are here having fun and feeling good right now. Forever.
Netflix Squid Game has made history by becoming the first non-English language show to be nominated for Best Drama Series at this year's Emmys.
It's also the first South Korea-produced TV show to compete in a major category at the awards. According to the Academy of Television's Arts and Sciences on Tuesday, 4 main cast members are also chasing wins for acting in drama series categories, a first for native Korean actors. Lee Jung-jae is in the running for Outstanding Lead Actor, Jung Oh-young for Outstanding Supporting Actress, Park Hae-soo and Oh Young-soo for Outstanding Supporting Actor. The Primetime Emmys is one of 4 major American awards, of course, for performing arts and entertainment. The ceremony will take place on September 12th. Time magazine has named South Korea's capital Seoul as one of the 50 greatest places of 2022, calling it the smartest city. It says Seoul is the first city government to integrate with the metaverse and is set to launch a virtual tourist program allowing people to view attractions using VR headsets. It also highlighted the country's high-tech features like self-driving shuttle buses at Incheon International Airport, air quality improvement devices on public transport and unlimited Wi-Fi service. India's Kerala, Japan's Setsuchi and Kyushu Islands, Indonesia's Bali and the Philippines' Boracay were among other Asian locations named.
The K-pop fan base is one of the largest around the world, and according to its fans, what makes the fandom stand out from the rest is its strong sense of community. The community is now taking more active roles, voicing their opinions on social matters. Yi Si-hoo tells us more.
The K-pop fan base and the fandom that comes with it has grown into one of the largest in the world, boasting more than 100 million fans around the world. It's also known as being one of the most passionate. But K-pop is no longer something only young people enjoy.
K-pop fandom isn't just for teens and those in their 20s as it was in the past. The age of the average K-pop fan is these days on a rising trend.
And according to a 2020 industry report by Hybe Entertainment, the K-pop fan industry, also called the fandustry, has a market size of whopping 7.9 trillion Korean won, or over $6 billion. While the global music industry's revenues from physical albums are decreasing globally, this is not the case for K-pop, where sales are actually increasing. Meanwhile, after an over 2-year hiatus due to the pandemic, in-person K-pop concerts have returned.
Standing behind me are K-pop fans waiting to see performances by their favorite artists. Regardless of nationality or race, K-pop has united fans from all around the world through their love of music.
K-pop fans share their excitement at being able to attend live concerts again.
It feels really fun and overwhelming a bit, so this is really exciting to see new groups.
According to the fans, what makes the K-pop fandom so special is its sense of community.
I really love the whole feeling of community and being able to band together, sharing common interest.
And the community has taken a step further from simply cheering for their artists by taking part in social activism.
For K-pop, I've seen a lot of fandoms come together to raise money for charitable donations and also to bring awareness to social issues around the world.
In fact, on Earth Day in April this year, K-pop fans gathered and protested in front of an entertainment company to encourage the release of albums that are more environmentally sustainable. BTS member J-Hope released an eco-friendly solo album in June without plastic CDs but with QR codes that fans can use to download and enjoy the music. The dynamic K-pop fan base is serving as the backbone of the industry. Yi Si-hoo, Arirang News.
It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Rival parties in South Korea's National Assembly are aiming to reach a compromise by the end of the week on committee leadership posts after weeks of failure to strike up a deal on who's going to lead which committee. Kwon Song-dong, floor leader of the ruling People Power Party, and his main opposition Democratic Party counterpart Park Ong-gun held talks this Tuesday where they agreed to reach an agreement by Sunday, which would mark Constitution Day, as the delay has been holding up the Assembly for weeks and weeks since its last session ended in late May. However, with huge mistrust and clashes over key committees, namely the Judiciary Committee, it's uncertain that there may be a breakthrough. So we discussed the prospects ahead with Song Se-ryun, Professor of Kyunghee University's Law School, and David Tizard, Professor of Korean Studies at Seoul Women's University. Thank you both so much for joining us. And well, my first question to you, Professor Song. Now, let's begin with the reason that the ruling party and the main opposition party is having this weeks-long rift over who's going to lead which committee. Why is it that they just cannot come to an agreement? And why is the Legislation and Judiciary Committee so significant?
Well, I think it's a power struggle, pure and simple. They're in a stalemate now how to form the committees, and which party will take the committee chairmanships, especially the Legislation and Judiciary Committee. And that particular committee, Legislation Judiciary Committee, as the name suggests, yields a big influence in legislative matters as well as judiciary matters, including impeachments. All bills pass through this committee, and the chairman traditionally had a power to block the bill and control the flow of the legislative process. So in effect, this gatekeeper role functions like having a Senate. Korea is a unicameral legislature, but this committee sits above all other committees, and in fact, have a gatekeeper role to control what legislation gets the focus and what passes. So in that sense, it is an important committee. But because of the agreements they had, that should have been resolved by now and get to the domestic and international matters that are very urgent in Korea and overseas.
And Professor Tizard, well, the Democratic Party, it's offered to hand over the chief post of the Judiciary Committee in return for the PPP's cooperation in launching a special committee on judiciary reform. But the ruling party has rejected this proposal on a few accounts. So why is this very much unacceptable to them?
Well, I think as Professor Song says, it's not just about control of these various committees, but it's about a broader shift of power. Nobody really expected the Conservative Party in South Korea to be in power at the moment. A couple of years ago, there was talks of decades-long rule of the Democratic Party, and that conservatism in South Korea was dead and buried. And so I think there was a lot of institutionalized practices. There was a lot of transfers of power, not just over the judiciary committee, but in terms of the prosecution, in terms of the police, in terms of the unification ministries, in terms of nuclear power. And so, whereas previously the Democratic Party were institutionalizing their own ideas, all of a sudden, rather unexpectedly, we have the Conservative Party in here with mayors of Seoul sweeping victories at the local elections as well as obviously the presidential election. And so now it's about handing over power back to the Conservative Party. So it's about a broader ideological shift in the country. I think what's really important, as Professor Song said, though, that this is taking a long time. There's a lot of give and take. There's a lot of worry about if this power is handed over, what then happens. So the checks and balances are important. But more important than that is that these two parties try to work together for the good of the South Korean people and for the good of the nation going forward, because the infighting doesn't really help anybody.
And well, as you mentioned, it looks like the Democratic Party is still coming to terms with this flip that we've seen in the National Assembly and the presidential election, of course. And Professor Song, despite the defeat that the DP faced in the presidential and local elections, the party seems to be very uncompromising at the National Assembly at the moment. So right now, how much leverage do they have in Parliament, and what are the key agendas or issues that they're going to continue to try and force through?
Well, they still have the numbers. They have the 169 seats out of 300 when the Justice Party and other parties that are favorable to the opposition party, they can muster up to over 180 seats, 80 votes. So they certainly have the numbers. But as you said, they lost the string of elections, including the presidential election and the latest one, the local election. So with this trend, they should feel lucky that the next general election is not until October 2024. So what kind of agenda they are pushing at this point? I think they are still trying to come to terms with the defeat, and it seems like their agenda lately seems to be on the ideological side rather than going for the economic and other important issues that people do care about and show up in the polls. So frankly, what is troubling is that we don't see at this point what is the vision of the opposition party. The same can go for the ruling party as well. But it seems to be a total or the kind of a worrying failure or dysfunctionality in the political sector as a whole.
So while progress on key issues really affecting people's livelihoods amid this cost of living crisis and also other economic issues lay unaddressed, the Democratic Party in May, they pushed through a series of controversial bills, including one that will strip the prosecution of its investigative powers, despite a lack of bipartisan agreement. So, Professor Tizard, do you think this has really broken trust towards the opposition party at the moment, and also by members, especially with members of the public as well?
It's a very interesting question, and the Democratic Party, they did have that National Assembly majority. They had the ability to fast track through various bills, and this was seen as a good thing at sometimes because it skipped a lot of bureaucracy. It allowed things to get done. But then came the problem when they knew they were going to be losing power. Were they putting through bills that would protect themselves or that would keep things in? You asked if the public are losing trust in the Democratic Party. I think both parties will always have their ardent supporters online. These supporters will be very vocal. They will be quick to counter any criticism of either the Democratic or the Conservative Party, and they will be quick to sing the praises as well. I think Professor Song made a really interesting point in that the parties themselves seem to be rather ideological at the moment in their stances, particularly vis-a-vis each other. However, the public have shown that they're not always ideological. Outside of the core support groups, people vote on pragmatic issues. They vote on the economy, they vote on housing, they vote on taxation, and they vote on what they see. A very big keyword recently has been this idea of hypocrisy, fairness, equality. Neronambul, this idea of romance and hypocrisy, became a huge talking point in South Korea. So I think for the majority of the public, what they want is fairness, they want equality, and they will be willing to shift their votes accordingly if they feel that their votes are not being adhered to.
And Professor Song, with this tug of war over the legislation and Judiciary Committee especially dragging out for so long, how are key bills and societal issues being affected?
Well, as they are out of the ring at this point, important bills are not debated or made into law, pure and simple. I think this is very unfortunate, as Professor Tizard pointed out. This ruling party going into the power knew that they won a very narrow victory. So the mandate from the people from the election is not that big. So they knew that they had to work together with the opposition party, who has a great majority. And we don't see the evidence of efforts of working together, any sincere effort after all. So I think that the people's disappointment about the political sector and the two major parties are getting larger and larger. I think that this will signal the breaking point at some point because we need the innovation and some kind of big change in the leadership and the composition and the vision in both parties. I think that point has not come yet, but seems like the Korean politics is going down the spiral where a big change is bound to happen, whether it was pushed by the political sector itself or from the popular opinions.
And Professor Tizard, well, the two floor leaders, they agreed that they would agree, which is something they should have done anyway, but they said that they would try and reach an agreement by Sunday. Do you see any bipartisan cooperation happening or trust between the two camps improving anytime soon?
I think they need to, and there's a symbolic day coming up, as you said at the start of the program. We have Constitution Day coming up in South Korea, and so I think it would be in both parties' interest to demonstrate to the public that they are willing to work together to some degree. Now, let's just consider our position as the public. Politicians, leaders, assemblymen, they ask us as the public to work together on issues of COVID-19, on issues of global warming and climate change, on issues of austerity and inflation. We're frequently asked as members of the public to work together, to get along and to take one for society. I think what these politicians need to do is recognize that they're required to do the same thing sometimes if we want to move forward. There was a really interesting article written by, a column written by Professor La Jong-il, previous ambassador to the United Kingdom. And what he said is that it's really important for these South Korean politicians to acknowledge that they are not enemies. They're co-workers, they're colleagues, and their job is to work together to create a better future for the citizens, because if they don't do that, then it's the citizens ultimately that suffer. So I would hope that going forward, these two entrenched parties, as much as they might have ideological differences, do start to realize that they're on the same team ultimately.
And Professor Song, well, as long as this conflict drags out, key issues are being neglected, taxpayers' money being wasted. Do you see any chance of a compromise happening anytime soon? What's it going to take to really get to that point?
Well, I think it has to do with the internal matters and also, as Professor Tizard pointed out, learning how to work together. I think that internally, both parties seems to be going through some sort of identity crisis. And that has to do with whether they can embrace the young generations and moderates. I thought that the PPP was making a stride when the Lee Jun-suk was going in as a young leader, but they seem to be mired in a power struggle. So that's the whole question itself. But going forward, I think that they have to look at the polls and what people are saying about this country and the role of the Korea in the world. If they don't learn to work together and pass laws and put things into action, I think that the recession that we're looming and all kinds of crises that we have to face as a middle power in the world probably will suffer very, very much. So in that sense, it's not just the internal matter, it's not just the party politics, it is about the future of Korea that they are dealing with. So I think that they should shape up pretty soon.
And on that note, Professor Song, the ruling party, it's been going through quite a rough patch recently following Chairman Lee Jun-suk's suspension over a sexual bribery scandal. Now, the party's decided that it's not going to hold a national convention to elect a new leader, though. So how do you think these party dynamics are going to impact support for the sitting government? And what do you think the PPP's strategy is in handling this crisis?
I don't know if they have the strategy at this point. I think we can point out that the other party, actually, Park Ji-hyun, going through same sort of treatment, I would say, from the party, the establishment. I think there is a crisis in terms of generational change that people feel that has to take place, but people in the power are very, very reluctant to give it up. I think that the big picture has to be that the young generations and young leaders, I'm not just talking about the Lee Jun-suk, but what he represents and what Park Ji-hyun represents, those new blood and new ideas and new ways of doing things should be a very valuable commodity to come in to both parties going forward. I think the PPP in particular, because they are the ruling party, they have to shape up, and they picked a worst moment to do this because the president's performance at this point is in question at this point. Then the ruling party itself has to supply the stability, but they don't think it is a priority, and that's an unfortunate situation.
And well, when it comes to embracing these generational changes, Professor Tizard, I know you have a lot to say on this, especially with the DP as well. It's been going through its own internal strife. How do you see them? What kind of changes do you think they're going to have to really make?
I think these changes have to be not just cosmetic. So both parties have looked to place young people in prominent positions. Now, are they putting those people there just for political expediency and to show that they're representing the youth, or do they really believe in that? We've seen the struggles of Lee Jun-suk and in the Democratic Party as well. These young leaders, they're not very welcome. They've had their own controversies and scandals, very different in nature, it must be said. But I think it's really important that the youth of this country, they're intelligent, they're forward-thinking, and they want to have a say in the country. It shouldn't just be cosmetic, but it should be genuine. We see in other parts of the world, entrenched political systems sometimes refusing to hand over power, and it becomes this kind of gerontocracy where old people rule, where we have presidents that are in their 80s and 70s. Other parts of the world, look at Finland, look at New Zealand, they've shown that young leaders, not just people in the party, but actually young leaders, bring with them new visions, new ideas. I think that's a possibility for South Korea, but it shouldn't just be cosmetic, it should be genuine. Whether it's capable of doing that is another question in itself, but it is possible, and it's up to South Korea to choose what it would like to do going forward.
Well, hopefully we'll see a major political breakthrough this Sunday, hopefully, but well, until then, we'll just have to wait and see, I suppose. But this is where we'll have to leave the interview today. That was Hong Tae-yeon, Professor of Kyunghee University Law School, and David Tissar, Professor of Korean Studies at Seoul Women's University. Thank you both so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now for a look at news from around the world, we turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning to you guys.
Let's start by taking a look at Sri Lanka, where the president has fled the country.
Well, that's right. So according to local officials, Sri Lanka's president Gotabaya Rajapaksa has actually flown out of the country and is heading to the Maldives. Now, the 73-year-old leader had been forced to announce his resignation amid protests on the back of the country's worst economic situation since its independence, marked by food and fuel shortages. Now, Rajapaksa was reportedly joined by 3 passengers, including his wife and bodyguard, on a military plane on Tuesday after unsuccessfully trying to leave on 2 flights from Bandaranaike International Airport. Now, the development comes as Rajapaksa planned to resign on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka's parliament is set to reassemble on July 15th and will select the new president on July 20th. We return to the UK with an update on the selection of a new Prime Minister, as 8 Conservatives are set to face off for the country's leadership position. Now, the Conservative Party's 1922 committee announced the nominated candidates on Tuesday ahead of the first round of voting on Wednesday. The 8 candidates set out their cases to fellow Conservative MPs in a closed session on Tuesday night, with the key issues likely to be tax cuts, serious government and honesty. A poll for the Conservative Home website found that former Defence Minister Penny Mordaunt is rather popular with members, while bookmakers have former Finance Minister Rishi Sunak as the lead candidate. The new British Prime Minister is set to be announced on September 5th. In the first 6 months of 2022, deforestation in Brazil's Amazon rainforest reached a record high. Data from the Brazilian Space Agency shows roughly 3,800 square kilometers of the rainforest have disappeared. This is the greatest loss since 2016 and is a size 5 times greater than New York City. Further data reveals that Amazon wildfires in June were the highest in 15 years and came earlier than the usual fire season in August and September. Greenpeace Brazil has blamed the destruction of the forest on agribusiness clearing land to grow crops. Continued burning and clear-cutting is also hampering the Amazon's ability to recycle rainwater, increasing the risk of drought and tree die-offs. Scientists say that over the last century, 17% of the rainforest has been lost. Now, there may be a way to clean up the microplastics from our oceans using mini robots in a new way. Made by a team of Chinese scientists from Sichuan University, the soft robot fish is just 1.3 centimeters in size. They aim to have the fish collect microplastics while providing data on real-time marine pollution. The fish is controlled and powered by light and can be safely ingested by other fish due to its biocompatible polyurethane makeup. It can even self-heal when damaged. The fish also outswims the competition, able to move at 2.76 body lengths per second.
Good morning. Massive rain clouds are approaching the capital region this morning. It has been drizzling since earlier in the day, and rain will pick up and spread to the rest of the country as the day goes on. And those in the capital region, Gangwon-do and Chungcheong-do provinces will receive heavier rainfall all day, 30 to 50 millimeters an hour, with possibly up to 150 millimeters of rain expected throughout the day today. So heavy rain advisory has been already issued in Seoul and surrounding regions, and it is likely that rain alerts will be expanded to more areas. Meanwhile, heat relief is in the forecast for most parts, but Jeju will have more steamy heat with a heat advisory being in place now. Gwangju and parts of Jeollado provinces are also under heat alerts. Well, other than the capital and Jeju, elsewhere we had some comfortable overnight temperatures, and highs will not rise that much from today's morning temperatures. Seoul will be going up to 26 degrees, Daegu and Daejeon topping out at 28 degrees Celsius this afternoon, but Jeju will be topping out sweltering at 34 degrees. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe. That wraps up our newscast for this hour, but we'll be back tomorrow for our Thursday's edition of New Day at Arirang.
Thanks for joining us this morning, and do stick around for more updates throughout the day. Have a great rest of your day wherever you are, and as always, take care.
오늘